Casey, is that?
Aaron.
Aaron, sorry. That's right, Aaron. Yes, exactly. How you doing, Craig?
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thanks so much for coming, everybody. We apologize for the location change for this hearing. We were hoping and planning to be across the street on campus, but had to move over here because of scheduling. So we'll be here today. We're also coming back here this exact same spot at noon on Monday to add another hearing just because we didn't have enough time to give everybody adequate notice for the location change. So if you know of anybody who wanted to come and wasn't able to come today, then please let them know we'll be back here Monday. Lisa, right?
Yeah.
Good to see you. So
Why did you pick these times? Because people at work can't come.
I know we're doing the best we can. We're doing 7 hearings, well 8 now statewide. We're trying to stagger them as best we can at the time of day. We were at Logan at 10 a.m. and we were at Solid County at 2 p.m. and we're here at 4 and going to be down at from 8. So we're doing the best we can and doing 8 hearings statewide. So.
That's only one that's after work hours out of 4.
There's a lot of people who
Well,
want to come.
I know. We're coming back at lunch on Monday. So if you know of anybody who wasn't able to come today, let them know that if they can get away during the lunch hour, we'll be back here on Monday. So, my name is Taylor Morgan. I work with Count My Vote. In the back, David May and Jay Council are helping me today. We do have, you'll notice the camera. The hearing is being recorded for public posting. That's part of the requirements of Utah statute with an initiative. So the hearing itself and then the comment period, also open to all of you at the end of this presentation, will all be recorded for public consumption. So what we're going to do is I have a short slide deck that will go through the basic mechanics of the Count My Vote initiative language, kind of walk through the election process and how our election initiative language would affect the election process. And then after, at the end of that presentation, we'll open it up for public comment. So everybody will have probably 3 minutes to, we usually do 2, but I think we have a smaller group, so we can do 3 minutes of public comment that'll be on the record. As we go through this presentation, certainly happy to answer any questions you may have about the mechanics or the technical elements of the process. But we would ask that if you have comments or commentary about the elements themselves, please save that until your comment period so we can get through the slide deck. Does that sound good? Okay. So first, Count My Vote is a nonpartisan, nonprofit effort that is focused on improving participation in Utah elections. Now, you may be familiar with Count My Vote's 2013 initiative that we launched. It was very similar, actually, to this initiative language to implement direct primary elections in Utah. We gathered about 105,000 signatures statewide, and we then worked out a deal, compromise with the legislature, that was passed in the form of SB 54. And so SB 54 was passed in 2014, and it has been effective for Utah elections now since then. And so I personally really like SB 54. I like the dual track path to the ballot. I like a lot of things about SB 54, but we have seen year in and year out how SB 54 has been under attack. It's been facing legal challenges and lawsuits. It's been facing political attacks and legislative attacks and threats every single year. And so we came to a point where we believed that we needed to put this decision where it belongs, and that is before the voters. And so the purpose of this new initiative is to give Utah voters the final say on the election process. And so that's how we got to where we are now. So direct primary elections facilitate greater participation. They improve candidates' access to the primary election ballot. They preserve the power of political party members to select their nominees. They give all party voters a voice in choosing those nominees. They reduce the potential for fraud and election irregularities, and they remove systematic obstacles to participation. So this is a model of the direct primary election process and how it would work. As you can see, the caucus and convention system is very much still in place. We don't touch that in terms of the party's ability as a private organization to hold caucus and convention meetings. That's still a very important party function. The states surrounding Utah all have direct primary elections, but their parties still use caucus and conventions for various purposes, such as nominating an endorsed party candidate among the candidates who could qualify by signatures to get on the primary ballot, to approve platform, to recruit and assist candidates with signature gathering. These are all some of the ways that a party could still use the caucus and convention system in a very meaningful way. Again, though, the caucus and convention system under this language would no longer be a path to put a candidate with that party's insignia on the primary election ballot. Come on in, we just started. So the way for a candidate to access to qualify for the primary election ballot is to gather at least 1% signatures that equal 1% of the registered party's members in the jurisdiction they're running for. So 1%. So we, under SB 54, those signature thresholds are quite high. Statewide, it's 28,000. Congressional seat is 7,000. State Senate seat is 2,000. State House seat is 1,000. And those signature thresholds are actually so high that if it weren't for the caucus convention path, they would be unconstitutionally high. The surrounding states that have direct primaries, the threshold is anywhere from 1% to 5%. And the idea behind the signature threshold is for a candidate to demonstrate a sufficient level of support. It's a barrier to non-serious candidates, but it is not a barrier that a serious candidate could not access the primary ballot. So the candidates get on the ballot by gathering that minimum number of signatures from only registered party voters in their party. The unaffiliated voters cannot nominate a candidate for any party. Only registered party voters in the candidate's same party, where that in the jurisdiction the candidate is seeking, can sign and nominate that candidate. Then the primary election, we have an important distinction too in this language is that we have addressed a potential plurality issue. So that if in a primary election, if no one candidate receives 35% or more of the vote, then the top two vote getters automatically advance to a runoff by mail election. And then, of course, the majority winner of that runoff would become the party's nominee and represent the party on the general election ballot. Some important points. This language would implement a direct primary election, not an open or a blanket primary. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the distinction there, but an open primary is where party affiliation doesn't determine the outcome in the sense that just whoever gets the most votes regardless of their party or in the general. That's not the case. That's not what our language would do. Our language would still work within Utah's existing partisan primary election structure. And because of that, we only impact partisan primary elections. So nonpartisan elections such as municipal elections, those elections, this does not have an impact on those because we only impact partisan primary elections.
Could you define the blanket primary?
What now?
Could you define the blanket primary? As you
You know, I actually am not entirely certain what the distinction is between an open or a blanket. I think it's also referred to as a jungle primary, like they have in California, but I'm not 110% sure on that. If anybody else knows, feel free to jump in. I think that's what it is, but I'm familiar with the term jungle primary, not this much blanket. So, yeah.
Taylor,
Yeah.
previous slide, you have 35%. Does that mean someone who gets at least 35% becomes the not partisan nominee?
So yeah, so if in a primary, if a candidate wins 35% or more, they win that primary. If no one candidate wins 35% or more, then the top two advance to the runoff.
So if two get 35% each, those two, or they both.
If they get 34.9% each, right? If one of them gets 35, they win.
But if
right?
one
But if
gets
two win
30
35, they go to the runoff.
But if one gets 36, then they're in.
Yes.
So what if both of them get 36%?
Then they're in the runoff.
Well, if they have an exact statistical tie, exact to the number of votes, then it goes to the runoff.
Well, okay, so 40 and 36.
40 wins.
Okay, thank you.
It's just if no one candidate wins 35 or
Oh, I
more,
see.
then the top two go to a
I
runoff.
see, thank you.
Yeah, and that number, that 35 is, that percentage number. We're certainly, I will say, a part of this process is receiving public feedback and comments. We've already made some technical adjustments to our language based on feedback from hearings. We've been working diligently with county clerks and election officials for months to really dial this in, because elections are very, administratively, it requires, complying with a lot of dates and deadlines and everything. So we're certainly, this 35% is based on working with Senator Kirk Bramble and some of the legislation that he sponsored. I think that number, I think 35% is, in that scenario, it's not perfect. Certainly a higher threshold of 40% is possible. I think the third district candidate, one with 42 or 43?
43.
Certainly, yeah, so that's something to look at. That's something really to take a look and see what that number is. I don't know that any number there is perfect, but at least that's what it is right now.
Different question.
Yeah,
The by mail, is that a requirement, or do you still allow the county to choose which method of election to run?
yeah, but I think only a handful of counties in Utah that are not doing by mail now.
Right.
So, yeah, that's still,
It still allows them?
yeah, it does. If they don't want to do a by mail runoff, then they would have the option not to.
Thank you.
But generally, based on the time slot for that runoff election, the by-mail election, I think would be the least expensive. But it's, going to be up to the county.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Yeah,
Are you considering the 50% threshold so you can make sure that the winner has a majority of support?
well, the ultimate winner in a runoff would have a majority, right? So, it's a good question. I think, again, that number is something to take a close look at, and it's hard to know what a perfect number there would be. Certainly, there's, folks have expressed the sentiment that, somebody should have a majority
But a
to
lot
win.
of other elections in the
But,
country do runoff
we've
based on-
seen, Abraham Lincoln won with 40%. We saw Governor Levitt win with 40%. We saw John Curtis just win with 42%. So, I don't know that any number is perfect, but it's certainly a good conversation. So, but this is the way it's in our language right now. So, yeah.
You said for congressional seats right now it's 7,000.
Under SB 54, 7,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what percentage is that? You're saying here it would be 1%, but.
So we're changing the threshold, because,
What percentage is the current threshold?
oh, it's like 8 or 9%. It would be unconstitutionally high. But it's only okay because right now there are two paths to the ballot, right? But in this language, under the direct primary election, there's the one path to the ballot. So those thresholds need to be constitutionally sound, and that has been determined to be within 1 to 5%.
Might be as high as 5.
Yes. Our surrounding states average about 2. Yeah. And again, the threshold, the concept there is that we want candidates to demonstrate a sufficient level of support among their fellow party voters, but at the same time, not put in place a barrier that is too high for anyone to access the ballot. So, yeah, sir.
Why any number? Why not everybody gets on it if they want to sign up to run?
Well,
What's
it's
the
a
point
good
of
question.
having
So
an
the
election if you don't get a chance to run? What happens is
Sir, we're going to have comment period. When we
Oh,
get through the
okay.
slide deck, you'll be able to speak for 3 minutes.
Okay.
But to be fair, the answer to the question is, the idea is to establish a requirement so that a candidate needs to demonstrate a sufficient level of support from their party voters, right? That's the idea. But to have it be low enough that that is not a barrier to anyone becoming a candidate. That's, whether it's right or wrong, that is the purpose behind that threshold. So. Okay, so then, let's see, kind of hit on some of these already. Candidate has to get signatures from registered party voters who are affiliated with their same political party and who reside in that same jurisdiction that they're seeking to represent.
What if they're
Let's see, unaffiliated signatures, unaffiliated voters cannot nominate a party nominee. So that's, in SB 54, in the case, in the lawsuit, Judge Newfer struck the unaffiliated signatures from the language. And so right now under SB 54, unaffiliated voters cannot nominate candidates. And so we've stuck with that so that, again, those signatures have to come from registered party voters. Unaffiliated voters are not eligible to nominate a candidate for any party. And as far as primary elections go, we don't touch the parties. The party can choose still whether to have an open or closed primary. The party is free to choose, but again, under no circumstance can unaffiliated voters nominate a partisan candidate. So, yeah.
Are voters only allowed to sign for one candidate?
Yeah, good segue. So that's where we're going next. So that's an important change. Under SB 54, voters could only sign to nominate one candidate in any race, right? We've changed that now. Voters, that is no longer in place. Under this language, voters can nominate more than one candidate in any given race.
By nominate, you mean
Sign, I'm sorry, sign. Yeah, I'm using words interchangeably. Sign. Voters can sign for more than one candidate. Yeah, that's an important distinction. Let's see, that threshold of 1% is even for all political parties. I have some sample numbers that I'll show you to kind of give you a sense of what those signature requirements look like. Right here we have the statewide numbers. So a Republican Party candidate that is seeking the governor, the Attorney General office, or the U.S. Senate, any statewide office, they would need to collect signatures from 6,514 registered Republicans in Utah. A Democratic Party candidate would need to collect 1,595 signatures. And so again, these are those sample signature requirements. You can see I went through the statewide numbers. The 4th Congressional, that is a multi-county congressional district, 144,000 Republicans, so a candidate would need to get 1,438. To be a Republican candidate, a Democratic candidate would need to collect signatures from 464 registered Democrats in the 4th Congressional. Senate District 16, which is here in Utah County, a Republican would need to collect signatures from 215 registered Republicans, and a Democrat would need to collect signatures from 27 registered Democrats for that district, and so on and so forth. Utah County, countywide, a countywide candidate, again, would need to collect 1,437 Republican signatures. A Democratic candidate countywide would need to collect 152
So
signatures.
1,437, that would be like for the county commissioner's office.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for county council, county commission, yeah. Yes. Any questions on the signature thresholds? And so these are substantially lower, right, than the current thresholds. Again, statewide right now it's 28,000. And part of that component was that when those thresholds were originally passed in SB 54, unaffiliated voters were able to nominate too. That's no longer the case.
Sign, I don't know.
Yes, well, sign is an act of nominating, yes. The sign. Lisa?
Have you considered how many people will get on the ballot and how crowded that ballot will be?
Yeah, we have. That goes to the threshold, right? That's one of the reasons for the seriousness test, right, is ballot crowding. But then that's another reason why we have the plurality language in there, is because it is possible to have, multiple candidates on the ballot in many cases. So, but from our perspective, more candidates seeking support from more voters and voters having more options at the ballot, we think that's a good thing.
So in other
Yeah.
words, you're penalizing the majority party by making them collect more signatures because they have more people. So you're actually giving favor to the minority party because they don't have to spend as much on collecting signatures compared to the majority party. To me, that seems unfair.
No, it's a 1% threshold that is fair across the board. I think it's harder. I mean, it's 152 Democrats in Utah County isn't easy. I'm just saying, the number's low. It's a 1% threshold that is even across the board. If you are trying to be a candidate for the Utah United Party, for example, I don't know exactly how many registered voters they have right now, but you probably only need a few signatures to qualify, right? So it's a 1% threshold. The percentage is even across the board. So,
But it's still,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll save it for my public comments.
Sure, okay. Yeah, I saw a hand over here, yeah?
So what if no candidate gets more than 35%? then you still take
The top two vote getters in the primary advance to the runoff.
Which could be conceivably 10% and 11%, depending on how many people are on the
Sure,
ballot.
yeah, under this language,
So
yeah.
that gives us the choice of somebody that only got 10 or 11% of the votes in the primary.
Or two people that did, yeah. And then in the runoff, the majority winner becomes the party's nominee. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so let's see, again, reiterating a few important points. And I will say, I saw Nancy walk in. Thank you, Nancy, at our last hearing made a really good point about, different ways to look at that runoff, like ranked choice voting and some other options that could be, I'm sorry, what?
Not for the runoff, for the initial.
Yeah, sorry, for the initial primary,
Yeah.
right?
To avoid a runoff.
Right, correct, yeah. And so those are, there's certainly all kinds of ways to look at that and, to legislate that and consider various options there in the primary process. And, our initiative is, the 35% plurality runoff is certainly not, at least I'm speaking from my own personal opinion right now. I don't think it's perfect, but is part of the overall direct primary process and system. We put that in place, and then I think we can look at other options, down the road that, whether it's ranked choice voting or other options, so, yeah. Did you have a question?
So specifically to the point that you just made
Yeah.
about integrating other ideas into this, which would
Yeah.
basically mean if this passes, and then if the legislature were to tinker with it by, let's say, adding in ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
I know that there's a preemption element to the language right now that would say, if certain things are passed within a certain time frame by the legislature, well, they would be void if they were to sort of undermine this system. Is it the position of Count My Vote that a ranked choice voting proposal from the legislature, if passed, to sort of say, okay, for the primary, we'll use ranked choice voting? Would that be something preempted?
No, I certainly think that if the legislature were to take a look at that, I certainly think that's something we could really quickly get behind and be interested in. Look, we're interested in looking at anything that will increase participation in elections. I think there have been significant advancements in technology and, in election administration and whatnot, and all those things are, worth a really good look. I mean, one of the things that is possible here too, and this may disagree with this or not, but increasing that signature threshold and then making letting voters nominate candidates by signing online, if you will, on the voter website where they update their registration, where, that stuff, the Lieutenant Governor's office has testified already that system is in place and it could be done securely. So there's all different ways we could improve upon this process. So certainly, I think that's something we'd be interested in looking at. There's a lot of things like that. So, yeah, I think the key is, though, the integrity of the process, meaning that registered party voters are the ones who choose the party nominees, the party candidates, right? That's the key to the process. I think, those details can be improved upon down the road for sure. Yeah. So, yeah. Did you have a hand up?
So you keep talking about changes down the road.
Yeah.
Are you saying that before this would go to the voters, the changes would be made, or would have to be made? Is this proposal what it is until and if it is passed, and then any changes are down the road?
Well, I would say, so right now, this language is in, our language is not final until after these hearings, and we turn it in. And so we're taking comment and feedback, and for example, we've already made a couple technical fixes and adjustments to the language today. And we're looking at these options, but when the language is final, when we do turn it in early next week, it will then be final in terms of qualifying for the ballot. Then we actually legally don't have the ability to change it per statute. Once we've completed the hearings and submitted our final language, we can't change it. And so we would then work to pass what it is on the ballot, and then from there, work with the Lieutenant Governor's office and county clerks to, enhance our elections however we can. So, yeah. Okay, let's see. We kind of hit these points already. We're not eliminating caucus convention system. Our fiscal note, our fiscal impact statement. This is also available on our website, just on the homepage there. countmyvoteutah.org. It's also available at elections.utah.gov. And so our fiscal estimate here is based on the Lieutenant Governor's Office has determined that they've estimated that it costs them about $2.9 million to administer a full, complete statewide election cycle. And so under our language with that primary runoff, that there's a possibility that there could be a runoff election in that scenario statewide in every race. And in that setting, the cost would be the same as running a full-blown statewide election cycle, which would be up to that $2.9 million. So that's the heavy piece of the price tag there. In addition, there's just the standard additional primary election administration of $40,000, $50,000 for signature verification, and then an additional $30,000 one time for publication in voter information pamphlet and some administrative costs. So that is the fiscal impact statement that we got from GOMB, Governor's Office of Management and Budget. Okay, so that is the slide deck. Our website is here. Again, my name is Taylor, and that's my email address. Certainly happy to stay in touch, and everybody's welcome to email me and stay in touch. We are going to be back here in this exact same location for another hearing on Monday, starting at noon. So if anybody wasn't able to come that you know of, encourage them to come at noon on Monday. And now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll open it up for public comment for 3 minutes each. David has a timer. We do have this camera in the back, so if you'd like, you don't necessarily have to come up front, but if you wouldn't mind standing up and you can face the camera or turn to the side if you'd like. Just state your name and where you're from, just so we can get all that for the public record. We're required to post that. So, yeah.
Is there more time for questions?
Yeah, I can answer any
Just a couple
questions.
things
Yeah.
based on what you presented in the first slide.
Yeah.
So why not wait until the legal challenge to SB 54 is decided on?
Yeah, it's a good question.
If that's being given as a reason, a potential thing that could happen.
Mhm.
I mean, does that mean that potentially the initiative could be dropped if the legal challenge fails?
Well, this is
No
less
reason
about,
to do this?
frankly, I think this is less, there's also legislative challenges on the horizon that we expect, when the session starts. So it's been under attack just relentlessly every year at the session and, in the courts. And so, and we're at a point now where there's just not a lot of time left to gather signatures and do an initiative. And we have to gather 114,000 signatures, statewide. And so we're at a point where we're just running out of time. And ultimately, we made the decision that the Utah voters should just have the final say on this. It's been debated for years. There's been a lot of, there's been a lot of legal action and legislative talk, and it's just time that the voters get to make the decision.
So the initiative will not be dropped if the legal challenge fails?
No, we're not, the legal challenge is kind of a separate issue at this point, yeah. That's a good question, though, that's fair.
Start.
Yeah, okay, thank you, everybody, we can go to public comment. What now?
2 3 minutes, what you said.
Oh, I said 3. Yeah.
You want us to kick us off? So, no public, all right, perfect. Go ahead.
Here. So the president. So my name is Wendy Bagley. I've been involved in politics here in Utah County for over 20 years. And I personally detest direct democracy, and that's what this initiative is about. It's about taking away the system that we've had in Utah for generations and which has been a very limited process, but has allowed for more participation from all across the state. It would replace that with a direct democracy, which limits participation because individuals will go and all that they'll do is they'll vote. That is it. I was reading through and kind of deciding or learning why did our founders set up our country to be a republic and not a democracy. And one of the things that was pointed out was Socrates, one of the founders. We think that's Athens, that's Greece, that was the beginning of democracy. But he hated it, and he said, if we have a ship sailing on an ocean, do we want to have sailors running the ship, or do we want to have just everybody, anybody? they're running the ship. And of course, you want sailors who actually know how to do the sails and the waves, or deal with the waves and everything. Now, that's not to say he's elitist, and that's something we've heard from the news and from Count My Vote, is, oh, the caucus convention system is just the elitists. I disagree. I believe, very much like Socrates said, is that those who vote need to be educated and skilled at voting. We've heard over and over again how the public schools are still very, very challenged in bringing our 18-year-olds to the level that they are competent voters. In my opinion, our caucus convention system, it's not perfect, but it is the best way for citizens across the entire state to get involved, to get educated, and to practice those skills of communicating with neighbors, of working out issues on a regular basis every 2 years. I believe that this system would actually decrease the amount of individual participation to just the bare minimum, doing a ballot, or maybe signing a piece of paper. We need much more. We've done more in Utah. That's why Utah has such amazing fiscal policy. We've had some fabulous successes here in Utah. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's keep what we have. So thank you very much. Oh, my other thing is, I still think it's very unfair to put such a high burden, even though you say that 1% of signatures of the registered party members is fair, it still creates a burden where the majority party has a higher amount of money to spend to get all those signatures, or more amount of time. It favors the minority parties, and it disfavors and put a disproportionate burden on the majority parties. Thank you.
Who's next?
My name is Lowell Nelson, and I just want to remind us that there was a 10-year period in Utah's history when we did have direct democracy, from 1937 to 1947. But the state quickly decided that's not the right, that wasn't the best way to go. And so they changed it back to our caucus convention system, which for years has delivered, as Wendy said, high-quality candidates, servants in public office, who help to maintain fiscal sanity in our state and individual, upholding the principles of individual liberty and so forth. So, with that bit of history, I just wanted to point out the opening slide. Every vote should count. That's the byline for this effort. But the vote of the person who votes for, if you have 3 or more candidates, then the votes of those who support the least favorite candidate, they're not counted. Everybody understands that, right? The people who voted for Tanner Ainge, their votes were not counted in this last primary, a month ago. Well, they counted for Tanner up to a point, but when Tanner didn't get all of the, he was the least favorite of the 3 candidates. And so once he was eliminated, then the people who supported Tanner, their votes did not count. And so we come to the virtues of a ranked choice voting system, right? If we're going to do this, something like direct democracy, which I totally oppose, but if we're going to do it, let's eliminate the plurality problem. Let's eliminate the spoiler effect and go directly to ranked choice voting, because that will allow every vote to count. Even the people who voted for Tanner Ainge, once Tanner's eliminated, the secondary preference of those voters is counted in the total outcome, either for John Curtis or for Chris Herod. So that's the virtues of ranked choice voting. We need that in this legislation. I strongly urge Taylor and his think tank, working group, to rewrite whatever needs to happen to make that happen. Finally, a jury is employed to decide the guilt or innocence of a person accused of a crime. Those 12 men and women are uniquely qualified to make the decision about that person's guilt or innocence because they have heard the evidence. They have studied the case, which the rest of us don't have time to do. We don't have room to do that. And so similarly, in direct primary, the mass of the voters, they don't have the time or inclination to vet the candidates with enough depth, the way the caucus convention system allows. Therefore, I urge you to oppose the Count My Vote initiative. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a question about, with the signature count, did you say, Taylor, that only, each registered voter is only allowed to sign one petition or that?
That's how it is now.
Current law.
Oh.
That's how it is now, but we removed that.
Okay, I
Yeah.
didn't understand
Yeah, if no one else does, I get extra time.
Where's that one?
I could talk all day about how much I dislike this. Okay, my name is Aaron Bullen. I'm an engineer here in Utah County. I am not politically connected. I do not hold a position of leadership with the Republican Party. I did not vote as a delegate in the Congressional District 3 State Convention. I'm by all objective and measurable standards a political nobody. The people from the Count My Vote initiative would have you think that I'm a political elite somehow because I do not support this initiative. I support the caucus convention system, and I want it to remain at least an option for our candidates to get on the ballot. In March 2014, creators of Count My Vote and the members of the Utah legislature agreed to a compromise, SB 54. They said, oh, under this compromise, more people can access the ballot. We even heard it from Taylor. There's going to be more options. And now they're trying to remove an option. They want less options. It doesn't make any sense. So now that the previously stated objectives of Count My Vote have been met, they created 3 more objectives. Increase voter participation. So there's no data to suggest that removing an option from the ballot would increase voter participation. If anything, it would disenfranchise those who support caucus and convention nominees and want them to be on the ballot. Number 2 would be enhance candidates' access to the ballot. They're removing an option to get on the ballot. They're removing a way to get on the ballot. So it does not enhance access, it removes access. And if anything, if you go the signature route, you either need to be wealthy or well-connected. If you don't have enough money to pay for people to go gather signatures for you, you need to amass an army of volunteers. Let's say I wanted to be on the ballot as a Republican, candidate. I would need to have either one of those. I don't. I'm not wealthy and I'm not well-connected. I could not get enough signatures, but theoretically, if I went through the caucus and convention system, I could talk one-on-one with people, I could convince enough people to vote for me, I could still get on the ballot. More options. Okay. Number 3 says require nominees to show a broad level of support, and this does not make sense because, well, the 28,000 signatures that were required, now it's only 7,000, that is exceeded by the number of people who attend caucus here in the state of Utah. If anything, you have more support demonstrated by getting a candidate through the caucus and convention system because more people have demonstrated support. So these 3 excuses, the only remaining reason that they would have this initiative is the obvious one, is to keep control of Utah politics in the hands of the wealthy and well-connected. The incumbent retention rate is 98%, and the only way that you would have that be reduced is to retain the option of a candidate being on the ballot through the caucus and convention system.
Can I speak again?
Sure.
Okay.
Public hearings.
My name's Nancy Lord. I'm from Bluffdale, and I see one of the most glaring problems with this particular initiative, whether you're for the caucus convention system or for a direct primary. The problem is that it says that if a candidate gets 35% or more in the primary, then they go directly to the general election as the party's nominee. Since when was 35% an acceptable threshold for moving a candidate forward? it's nowhere close to a majority. I thought we believed in majority rule in this country. We can do better than this. We need ranked choice voting in not just our partisan primaries, but in our general elections. But this moves us in the wrong direction of suggesting that the idea of a runoff because a candidate couldn't get more than 35% is acceptable. And the problem with that is when we put bad laws in place, then it sort of teaches the electorate that that's acceptable, that that's the good way to do it. And so then you go a generation or two where people think, well, that's how we do it. So it must be right because we're doing it that way. I think at a minimum, if the Count My Vote people, Taylor, could insert something that would say if the legislature adopts ranked choice voting either before or after the implementation of this, that the runoff provision and the 35% threshold would be done away with in favor of the RCV.
Sure, yeah.
Because the legislature, the House did in the last session pass an RCV bill by 59-12. The Senate is where it died. But the interim committee of the Government Operations Committee supported our ranked choice voting as a committee. So now it's going to come forward with Mark Roberts as the sponsor this next year. And we're hoping it's going to pass because we need to deal with the vote splitting problem that's been caused by SB 54 by allowing multiple candidates, more than the 2 that used to be on the ballot, to now come forward. You can have 3, 6, whatever. We need some kind of ranked choice voting, even if it's only top 3 ranked choice voting. And your initiative needs to recognize that because the way it's written now, even though your intention might be to say, oh yeah, we'd accept RCV, the technical wording might make the legislators think, well, why are we going to waste our time because it's just going to be negated if this initiative passes.
Yeah,
So-
sure. Sure, yeah,
And
we
then
should
they
look
have
at
to do
that.
it
I'm happy
twice.
to, we're happy to, we should talk and, you know, we can chat with our drafting attorney and,
Right.
yeah, sure, let's take a
Plus,
look
they're
at
already
that,
in the
sure.
process of buying new machines that
Yeah.
are ranked choice voting.
That are,
capable. So
yeah,
the cost factor's been pretty much done away with.
interesting. That's good, yeah.
My name's Josh Daniels. I'm from Saratoga Springs. Maybe just to piggyback off of the last comment, this is a very specific technical comment for your review of the bill. On page 4, line 88 is where the preemption provision resides in the current draft language, the repeal of certain provisions. So a couple of things with this. Number one, I think this is a technical problem that could impair the perception of the proposal here because it binds the legislature's hands in the 2018 general session by saying that any acts that the legislature enacts that have to do with the nomination or election of candidates. And if you watch legislative sessions, every year there's a number of ways in which the legislature tinkers with election code, often at the request of the Lieutenant Governor's office for things that just need to be corrected. This is a pretty broad provision that could preclude the legislature from basically enacting any kind of election code reform in the 2018 session. So you might consider narrowing the language to say something like significantly impairs the purposes of creating a direct primary or something. Right now the language is pretty broad. It could be construed to cover basically any election reform that the legislature passes in 2018. And then on line 95, there's a reference to code section 7212.3b2. There's not a 3b2, there's a 3b that has to do with the initiatives and how the legislature, after an initiative is enacted, can amend the initiative. So just you might want to just edit that. But so those are my 2 comments. I think that would improve the proposal. And it would allow the legislature to kind of do its normal business of changing election code a little bit at a time over time without necessarily impairing the overall purpose of this particular initiative. Thanks.
My name is Skylar Burnside. I'm actually from Salt Lake. I was a delegate a few times. Just a few fundamentals about this initiative. When I first found out about the caucus system before any changes were made, I was a 21-year-old kid, didn't really know anything about it except putting in your name next to the bubble and your choice. You pretty much look at the ads, you Google them, and see kind of what they're about, and you kind of have to make the decision that way. When I had my first few conversations with actual candidates, person to person, it was an entirely different field of study. It was night and day, where you can actually ask in-depth questions about policies, about bills they've presented, about anything that they've actually done in their lives. And you compare that to the sound bites and the pre-scripted debate questions that you get from Deseret News and from any other media outlets. It's a night and day difference. So it's not to say that other voters aren't educated, they're plenty educated, but because it's impractical to have hundreds of thousands in District 3, there's 200,000 plus registered Republican voters. It's impractical and unfair to ask candidates to try and communicate with each of those people personally. It's not going to happen. That's why the system exists. It should not change. Now, on a more fundamental note, most of the founders of this initiative are wealthy. So we've got the Miller crowd, we've got LeVar Webb, we've got media moguls, we've got the Levitts, we've got the elite here. Okay, this is not about counting your vote. This is more about having the elites having more control over elections by the way that elections are done. So instead of having to answer tough questions from people who are committed, they're actually just having to send out sound bites and say, I support the Second Amendment, or I support immigration reform. But what does that actually mean? You can't follow up with questions unless you purchase expensive tickets to a gala or something like that, where you might be able to ask one or two before you're bustled along in the line. This initiative is about control of politics by the elite. It's not about counting your vote. Okay, I go to a day job every day. I'm not a politically elite person. I'm not wealthy. I'm not a media mogul. The people who fund and ask for this initiative to pass are. So I would ask Mr. Taylor to withdraw this initiative. Thank you.
No, I think it's coming from there.
Go ahead. That's over.
I'm Sharon Anderson, and I live in Orem, and I appreciate the comments that have been made. This certainly is an initiative by the elite to maintain power. When they say on the slide it says citizens initiative, well, I guess the Huntsmans and the Levitts and the Romneys are citizens, but they don't represent most of the citizens in our state. Count My Vote is a business. It's a DBA. And it's called Alliance for Good Government. And
That was actually our 2013 PIC, Political Issues Committee. Our PIC with this initiative is called Count My Vote. So you can search that on the disclosures.utah.gov website. That was 2013.
I assume that the donations have moved over to the new
Yes,
organization.
yeah. So everything, the Alliance for Good Government reports are still available, but that has been closed.
Okay.
So all the new disclosures and reports for the new initiative are associated with the PIC called Count My Vote.
Okay.
Yes, you can search them and find it under that name.
Okay. When they say it's a nonprofit, we know from being here that nonprofits can hire people to do their work for them, as we're having this discussion today. So people have been put in huge amounts of money to hire people to come persuade Utah voters that this is a good thing, this Count My Vote. I'd just like to run through some of the donations that were made to promote Count My Vote. Hatch Election Committee, $50,000. The Levitts, in two different groups, $50,000. The Romneys, $99.9 thousand. The Huntsman Corporation, $100,000. The Millers, Mark and Gail together, $50,000. Eccles, $30,000. Hanson, $35,000. And there's some others that are not as well known. Big business. This is also a movement to promote favors for big business, because do you think they're going to support candidates, try to get them elected so that they can pass favorable legislation, we should say. But we do have the Chamber of Commerce from Sandy, $49,000. Anyway, this is available online. This is a move by the elites and by the rich, and it makes our elections a rich man's game. Because not only do we have to, does a candidate have to get signatures, which he can pay to do. During the last signature gathering for Congressional District 3, someone came by gathering signatures, and the person at the door said, well, how much are you getting paid? It was like $8 a signature. So $8 to $10 a signature to, for a statewide position then, if you need 6,500 signatures, multiply by 10. So how many candidates can up front pay $65,000 to become a candidate in a primary election? And then you've got the expenses of running the campaign. But I guess if you vet people out, if they don't have enough to get on the ballot, then they probably don't have enough to pay for all the expensive flyers, the campaign ads, the signs, etc.
Taylor took her some for
Not every time we talk about it, I'll do it,
Okay,
so.
thanks. Anyway, I hope this doesn't go through because it really takes away our voice and the voice of ordinary people.
I'm Lisa Shepherd, I'm a Provo resident, and I think you might have looked at my notes here, but I just want to talk about a personal experience that I had. In 2008, I ran for the Utah House, and I went through the caucus convention system. That was our only way, our only method of getting on the ballot. I spent about $1,284 to do so, and I lost in convention by 2 votes. And so that's telling you how it is. In my House District 61, there's about 44,000 at that time registered voters, and I'm going to say, let's just guess, there's about 20,000 at this point. If I were a candidate and went and secured, I think I saw it said for Salt Lake House District, Taylor, did it say 33 signatures?
For one of the districts. For
One of the districts.
Yeah.
Let's say I had to just get 100 signatures.
Yeah.
And let's say that there's 50 people that could get 100, well, I guess that would be quite a numbers, but let's say there's 15 people that got those signatures. So now I have 15 opponents, and I want to send out letters to all of the registered Republicans because they all have an opportunity to vote for me. It would cost me $9,600 to send that. That makes it impossible. I would not be able, I could get on the ballot, but I wouldn't be able to campaign effectively. And through the caucus convention system, I can go sit in the living rooms, and I did. And I would go twice sometimes. Like, I remember there's one man, I went at the very beginning, the first person, he was the last person, and I went back to see him. I was able to have that face-to-face interaction. And that's what our candidates can do now. And I think that in the method that we currently use, in the caucus convention system, you have the opportunity to hold your elected officials' feet to the fire. Hold it to the platform of your party, which I don't believe in a strict count my vote method, that we would have that ability to hold our candidates' feet to the fire to our policies that we want them to enact if they're carrying our banner. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is going to be a little different. I actually support the Count My Vote initiative, and I think a lot of your arguments are...
What's your name?
Clayton Price. Sorry, I'm from Pittsburgh Grove. I think a lot of your arguments, while well thought out, are a little misplaced. One, this promotes the elite. Orrin Hatch has been in office for now 40 years, so to say that the convention system is not run by the elites or not favoring incumbent candidates who are now elites is a little misplaced there. Also, the convention systems usually happen on weeknights and often change last minute. In 2016, they all happened on a Tuesday. They all happened Tuesday night. Convention system caucus happens on a Tuesday night. It did in 2016, and I believe it did in 2017 as well. So Tuesday night makes it really hard for most people. Also, conventions have been known to change last minute due to booking problems because a school needs that for a school function, so they have to move, which then makes it hard for people who work weekends, like myself, to actually attend and actually be a delegate or vote on delegates or actually be a part of the system. Also, the idea that we are fiscally responsible, while yes, for the most part, Utah is run fiscally responsibly, right now, in 2016, the Alpine School District passed a $750 million bond. We're so fiscally responsible, we'd be able to budget our money a little better so we wouldn't have to bond so much. Also this year, Canyons, Jordan, Granite, and there's one other Salt Lake School District are also asking for a total of about, I think it was close to $900 million in bonds. Again, fiscally responsible does not always equal covering our bases. We want better education. Well, then let's actually educate our students on how to participate in the system instead of just educating them that you should vote because it's your civil right. I grew up in a home with 2 school teachers. My dad teaches U.S. government, so I got my civil education from him. I grew up in rural Utah. 98%, actually 99.8% Republican. I am very aware of how Republican our state is and how we lean, but I also believe the convention system leads to more extreme candidates, which ultimately does not benefit us as normal citizens, because extreme only leads to fundraising from the extreme on both sides, right? We've mentioned Republicans a lot because we're a Republican state, but also on the Democratic side. It leads to extremes. We need centrist candidates. And unfortunately, those people who stay and are delegates for multiple years tend to get more extreme in their time. That's statistics. Thank you.
Good?
How much time do we got?
We have 3 minutes.
America's being unfair, but I know some of you, so it's not as bad. I'm Mike Farragher, and I'm just coming here as a citizen more than anything. I do support the initiative, but I also see some things to be concerned about that I think some of the concerns that have been raised are legitimate concerns. I think that the initiative has come as a result of a lot of frustration from voters that feel like a faction of the Republican Party that is very vocal for good reason has taken too much control of that process. A lot of people, I know as a voter, for me, it was really hard to get to caucus meetings. And I think a lot of people who vote are frustrated with that, which has led to this kind of proposal. But I also am concerned, and I don't want to sound like I'm kind of straddling things here. I'm kind of a person that is pragmatic. I like to take the best things of what I hear on both sides and try to incorporate those. I want to see a proposal that does not allow too much money to get in. I think candidates like we saw in the congressional race, like Paul Fife, for instance, he would not have been able to run if I think this proposal in its current form existed. At the same time, you know, I think that we have to sit down and I think we need to look at perhaps a compromise again at some point like we've had. I think that's served us a little bit better than the current one because it's allowed both sides to have those things that they want. You know, the caucus, I think the caucus system is in need of some reforms. I think it can be done. I think it's not as efficient as it could be in gathering votes. At the same time, I'm concerned about, you know, this initiative. I'm worried that, you know, the unintended consequences of the amount of money that can get into politics. And I want to see average citizens money. I think that's, you know, I think that's what helps keep our great state great. You know, I think money has its place in politics. You can have influence with a lot of money. But I think if you talk to an average voter, you'll probably hear them say something along those lines. And so I hope that I don't sound, you know, weird or anything like that, but I don't think those things can be mutually exclusive. And I think, you know, if people are willing to look past all the platitudes and all of that, if we're willing to approach it with an open mind, we can accomplish that. Thanks.
Anyone else like to speak?
I know. You go.
Let's go first.
I wasn't planning on speaking, but I can't sit here anymore and listen to this. I'm from Illinois. I'm from Obama country. And I came here to Utah and found out about this, that I could be a delegate, that I could make a difference, that I could represent the people in my neighborhood. And if I didn't represent them, they would vote me out and pick somebody else. But what a great experience it's been to me, for me. Talking about, it's hard to get to caucus night. It's one night every 2 years. And now they've changed it. You can vote without being there. So there is no reason that you don't have a voice. You do. You do. You don't have to be there. You can turn in your ballot. Your neighbor can take it to caucus night for you. Another thing, I was thinking about California, and I don't know if you remember when Arnold Schwarzenegger ran. He got 20% of the vote and won the governorship in California. There was like 13 to 15 candidates, but he got the 20% and he won in California. And look how effective he was. Is that what we want? And also, it's so deceiving. Count my vote. Does Panguitch's votes count or Tooele's votes count? No, you know what votes are going to count? Salt Lake City. They are going to decide our candidates on Count My Vote because they're the concentrated population of our state. Is that what we want? No, we want Panguitch to be able to have a voice, and we want Tooele to have a voice, and we want all the little towns. That's what's so cool about this caucus system. It's a representative government, and people from all over the state can voice who they want. So think about what you're doing, guys. You're throwing away an amazing way to get involved in politics in your state. And somebody that doesn't have money can run. Otherwise, you will have the candidates with the name recognition and the money. That's who's going to win in our state if we go with this. Sorry, but
What's your name?
my name's Kathy Young. I'm from Orem, and I'm just a regular citizen, a mom and a grandma who loves the caucus system and thinks we're crazy if we get rid of it. Okay.
I'm Melanie Sorensen, and I'm from Orem, and I have a lot of thoughts. I oppose this Count My Vote initiative for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the most important ones is this is going to keep us from being able to get really good candidates. Like other people have said before, the caucus system in a really unique way allows just kind of your average neighborhood candidate, maybe just some really decent man or woman of great character, to be able to come to the caucus with their little black and white flyer that they've hardly spent any money on and talk to people that are invested in taking the time to get to know them. And they can answer questions and they can talk about what their positions are. That kind of decent person will have no chance in a system like this. This puts it right down to money and who has the most money and who has the most name recognition. It favors incumbents and the wealthy and the elite, which I think is the intention of this supposed citizens initiative that comes from the most elite and wealthy people in the state of Utah. Am I supposed to believe that out of the goodness of their hearts, they want so desperately to increase voter participation? It seems to me like they're frustrated that they can't control everything that happens in a caucus, and that they want to be able to use their money to make sure that the candidates that they want end up in office, and that they keep those incumbents in there for as long as they want. If those kind of candidates can't come to a caucus system where they talk to a small amount of people, hundreds of people, maybe 1,000 people, as opposed to tens of thousands of people, then they have to have money for flyers. We as voters have to rely on small sound bites that we cannot verify. Well, they have to have money for ads and billboards instead of just talking face to face. And the accountability decreases. The only time that our elected officials have to actually face their voters is when they come and talk to the delegates, and they actually have to answer questions about what they've done. Instead, they can bypass all of that and just get their little sound bites out to the general population who has very little way to be able to check up on if that's really true or not. And so where do they get that money? Where do they get enough money to buy signatures and to buy the flyers and to buy the TV and radio ads? They have to get it from somewhere. And then they are beholden to those people that they get those money from. Major corporations, lobbyists, instead of being beholden to their actual constituents, they're beholden to big money.
Anybody else want to talk before we?
Do you mind if I take just one more minute? I kind of want to rebut, as it were, a few things that were said. So first of all, it's just I don't think it's a coincidence that this thing happened right after Bob Bennett was voted out. Everybody was okay with it up until then, but as soon as he was out, and the irony is that Tim Bridgewater, the more moderate between Mike Lee and Tim Bridgewater, actually got more delegate votes than Mike Lee did. He was only 2% off of being the victor in the convention. And then Bob Bennett and Orrin Hatch both won in the primary. So to say that the Orrin Hatch, one who's been there for the longest, Dan Lillenquist actually managed to force a primary, but the primary voters still voted for Orrin Hatch. So to say that he is somehow the product of the delegate system is actually disingenuous entirely. And it's actually also disingenuous given that he's actually given money to this initiative. So just a few clarification points. Thank you.
You guys want to do a comment? Hasn't spoken yet? If that's the case,
Okay.
we'll...
Thank you for coming. We'll be back here again, same place at noon on Monday. So thanks very much for coming and appreciate your attendance.
You guys are